Let's talk about the end of the world. We've been talking about it for a while in many different ways. Movies, books, and news media all speculate on the apocalypse, dystopia, nuclear fallout, and all other kinds of catastrophe. We as a culture are fascinated by all of this collapsing. And yet when we're faced with a real catastrophe, real problems that need solving, we seem to be utterly unequipped to handle it. Climate change is an excellent, ongoing example of a big ol' mess we haven't really been able to get moving on. There's a lot of factors involved in this. Politics is a big one, international relations, economies, public trust in science, and perceptions of extraction. But the one I want to focus on in this video is much more subtle, much more pervasive, and much more personal. Dread. I'm sure you've seen this graphic at some point. This is the climate clock, and as of filming, it has 3 years, 92 days, 13 hours, 39 minutes, 34 seconds remaining. This is the amount of time we have to take action to limit global temperature change to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The number scientists agree we cannot surpass to limit the amount of damage caused by climate change. Limiting this temperature change means lowering carbon emissions by switching to green energy, planting trees, creating and implementing carbon capture technology, and more. It's a lot of science and a lot of change, and it rests mostly on global leaders to allocate funds for this science and permit this change. The handheld version of this clock was originally commissioned by Greta Thunberg, and yes, it's scary as shit on purpose. She had it with her during her address to the UN General Assembly in 2019. As she spoke, the clock counted down, marking the urgency with which world leaders need to act. I don't really have a problem with this usage of the clock. I have a problem with this. The placement of the clock in Times Square, New York. Showing this countdown to the most powerful people in the world is a challenge. Are you okay with this? Can you look me in the eye and tell me that this number doesn't matter? Can you tell the world this doesn't matter? But when you shift the target audience to a bunch of tourists and scale it up to absolutely massive, I begin to wonder what the point is. I cannot change the way this clock moves, not alone. I'm not provided with any particular solution I should focus on or a particular problem I should protest against. I don't know who to root for, which politicians to write to, where I should cast my ballot. I just know that I should be very worried. Here's the tricky thing. This clock is regularly adjusted based on research from the Mercator Research Institute on global commons and climate change. If a country changes a law, moves to green energy, builds a new coal power plant, the clock is moved accordingly. When the clock was first unveiled in Times Square in 2020, it said we have 7 years. 6 years later, we still have 3 on the clock. We've also seen other climate deadlines come and go. In 1970, Life magazine wrote that in a decade, people in cities would need to wear gas masks due to severe pollution, based off ecologist Kenneth Watt's work. There are 2 reasons that these dates were not the end of the world. First of all, like I said, these dates are based on data that is dynamic. Climate models use the data they have in the present and extrapolate based on current trends. Sometimes we end up moving the deadline a little further back and buying ourselves time. Then, when the prophesized day comes, nothing will happen. Not because the problem doesn't exist, but because the data has changed. The other reason these dates don't tend to mark the end of the world is because, well, they don't. These dates are not meant to be threats, they're more like action plans. A lot of previous dates were roughly 10 years out from when the prediction was made. Making changes within 10 years minimizes damage, and it's a reasonable time frame for large-scale change. If we do not fix this problem within 10 years, some damage will already be done, the problem will become harder to fix, require bigger change, and even more money, is a more adequate message, but it's not as catchy. The Life magazine gas mask prediction is a great example. No, we are not wearing gas masks right now. But in the decade after 1970, the Clean Air Act was passed, DDT was banned, nitrogen dioxide and particulate pollution became regulated, and the respiratory health of the North American population has improved. This doesn't mean that pollution is not a problem. It means that the solutions we used were effective. And those solutions came from protests that emerged because of that Life magazine publication. And again, if we did reach a climate deadline, nothing would happen. Not here, at least. Not now. I'm in the Great Lakes region of Canada. Climate change won't affect me for a long time after this deadline is passed. Meanwhile, folks have already had to flee Alaska due to the immense loss of fishing season, and the Maldives is in the midst of making a plan for when sea levels rise enough to wash away their incredibly low-lying islands. Many species have already gone extinct due to climate change. That's already happened, but in case you haven't noticed, the vast majority of the world, or at least the part of the world with power and voice, didn't change all that much. And the absence of change is incredibly unnoticeable. Some of these dates we've seen crop up in media have been impactful and have passed, but the impacts are being felt in a part of the world that doesn't often get heard. So we keep moving this number around and the apocalypse keeps not coming, and this message gets more and more diluted. But does that mean that this countdown doesn't affect us? Not if you believe in climate change. All of the stuff I've already discussed is decent enough cannon fodder for denialism, sure, but this is not going to change the mind of someone who understands the 97% scientific consensus rate, which is like the gold standard, by the way. If you believe in climate change, this clock represents narrative foreclosure, a premature conviction that death is nigh. We've been living in a long-term state of heightened anxiety for a long time, related to something we can't see or touch. You can't stop time, and this clock is ticking. Like I said before, this was designed to reach the eyes of powerful world leaders, not you and me. And without any call to action or thing you can do to change how this clock moves, it feels like our fate is sealed. And if our fate is sealed, why do anything at all? I also want to reach back into my art school undergrad for a second and talk design. These graphics scream death and destruction, not appropriate action plan timeline. The red is the accent color here, the one used sparingly and meant to stand out, while the blue recedes. The blue is slightly muted, while the red is almost a pure hue. That means that the deadline text is in harsher contrast with the red, while the blue is a little closer in shade to the black, making it pop less. And then there's the movement. The deadline graphic moves each second, reliably, while the lifeline cycles through data that is much more static. All of this culminates into a graphic that is designed to bring your eye to the deadline and tell you that it is scary and serious. I haven't even mentioned the lifeline section yet. That's the progress that's being made. It cycles through data such as percentage of energy from renewables, the amount of money divested from fossil fuels, and the percentage of land and water that is protected from industrial activities. It also presents solutions by suggesting how much money could be saved by acting quickly to reduce the impacts of climate change or by reducing subsidies given to the oil industry. All of these data points are combined and given the same amount of space as the ticking clock. It's imbalanced. It doesn't feel close to home or very actionable. The climate clock is just one indicator of the fact that thinking about the end of the world isn't all that helpful. The pandemic was a great example of this. We were inundated with tipping points and other statistics about death, economic collapse, and suffering. A lot of people didn't take the recommended actions to mitigate this. Some of those people looked around for evidence of this in their immediate lives and found nothing, so they dismissed the doom as overdramatic. Other people jumped to narrative foreclosure. That was it. The world was ending, people were gonna die. Why wear a mask? Why not be close to your loved ones in the face of an apocalypse? This doomerism is rampant in the world of climate change opinions. With so many deadlines long gone, it's hard not to feel like our fate is sealed. Not to mention the other ways nihilism fuels us. We've seen time and time again how hard progress is. Even in our personal lives, doing what we've always done is way easier than doing something different. Right around the same time I started thinking about the doom and gloom of environmentalism, I picked up this book. Generation Dread, Finding Purpose in the Age of Eco-Anxiety by Britt Ray. I was about to start researching climate change communication for my master's, and I knew it would be sketchy territory mental health-wise, so I wanted to be prepared. Ray identifies this doom and gloom, this nihilism, as a coping mechanism for eco-anxiety. Humans have evolved to handle the stress of imminent danger. When we survive by way of withstanding stress, we pass that trait along. But this function only really works when overcoming stress is something we can or cannot survive in a very immediate sense. Think of cavemen running from predators and making quick decisions under pressure. Correct action in a situation when you may die is critical to our survival and passed down. Climate change is stressful, but stressing about climate change won't kill you, so evolutionarily, our brains haven't inherited a way to manage that stress. Ray notes that while the pandemic was difficult to deal with, we did ultimately deal with it. She says that this adaptation is still with us, and it shows up when we panic over dramatic events like the exponential spread of a virus around the globe, but don't take the steps to defend ourselves from steadily worsening climate disruption that promises to kill many more humans. We tend to stick with whatever we've invested time and resources into, like the fossil fuel system we've built, and ignore clear evidence that it's harming the planet. So we haven't evolved a way to psychologically face the unimminent stress of a slowly changing climate. In Generation Dread, Ray lays this out by using philosopher Timothy Morton's concept of the hyperobject, which is another book on my reading list. According to Ray, a hyperobject is distributed across space and time to such an extent that our minds cannot fully comprehend it. It is both everywhere and between everything, from fish in the sea, to infection-borne rates of vector-borne diseases, to struggles of generations yet to be born, to national defense spending, to melting glaciers. We can't contain it or turn away from it, but we also can't look at it or face it head on. We know that if we don't solve it, generations down the line will suffer the consequences. Barring massive change as well, there's nothing we can do to protect ourselves or our loved ones from the fallout of climate change. During the Cold War, people built nuclear bunkers. There's no bunker for this. For better or for worse, environmental activism tends to play into this and go hard on the bad news. On one hand, who can blame them? There's a lot of bad news out there. But as we see with the countdown clock, it's hard to direct this bad news. It needs to both capture the right audiences and have a call to action that aligns with it. Telling an average American to stop burning fossil fuels is downright unrealistic. Telling an oil company they need to stop drilling is just not going to work. Even if you have the right message and target audience, algorithms dictate that your most successful pieces of communication must go viral. So everyone is trying to be the loudest voice out there. Combine that with every other cause and piece of news online, and the little glowing box you stare at before you go to bed and when you wake up becomes a bad news machine. Climate change aside, we are inundated with crises by way of social media. Logging off feels like ignoring suffering, but watching doesn't make us feel much better. And offline, we see ourselves implicated in climate change in our daily activities. Overwhelmed by a media diet oversaturated with dread and fear, we tend to go numb. Or even worse, we turn in on ourselves and play dead like a scared possum, hoping our problems will go away if we don't move. This culminates into a new world of climate change. We've previously seen the deniers and the believers, those who believe we can continue business as usual and those who believe that things need to change, both of which are based off of a rejection or acceptance of scientific consensus. Now we have a third category, conceived of acceptance of scientific consensus with the addition of a nihilistic outlook on the world. Climate doom. Just like any other position on climate change, doom is not a neutral stance. This opinion is highly weaponized by those with agendas that benefit from the status quo. If we accept a reality in which our world is going to end, making change is pointless. We don't need to stop using oil, burning fossil fuels, and overconsuming. Then there's PragerU, which has actually gone way in the opposite direction. PragerU, for those unaware, is a nonprofit with a prominent YouTube presence that makes videos about conservative viewpoints. Despite calling itself the Prager University Foundation, PragerU is not an accredited academic institution. It rather poses as one to legitimize its content, which ranges from problematic to downright disinformation. They've gone after trans identities, raising the minimum wage, gun control, evolution, and of course, climate change. In their case against climate change, they use the apocalypse narrative to discredit environmentalism as a doomsday cult. I won't get too into it in this video because it's kind of long and it's been unpacked by lots of people already, but it demonstrates how weaponizable this mindset is. They take advantage of the word apocalypse, which is used in two different ways. First, to refer to the end of the world as we know it in general, and second, to refer to the end of the world as we know it as prophesized in a religious text. Doomsday cults believe that the end of the world is near, as per a religious text, and those in the cult will be safe from it, and the rest of the world will not. This apocalypse, then, is not something to prevent, but rather something the believer needs to accept for the sake of self-preservation. I can't lie, this is not dissimilar to the mindset of a doomer. The main difference is that the doomer does not believe they will be saved, but rather that they'll experience the consequences of their actions in this apocalypse, which is also not dissimilar from Christian and Catholic ideas of penance. But doomerism is not a cult, and environmentalism isn't either. They do not have leaders, totalitarian structures, rituals, or any abusive or isolationist practices. The term cult is pretty loosely defined, but it's safe to say our area of focus in this video does not fit the bill. The one overlap, and yes, it is pretty significant, is that a lot of people do believe they will witness the end of the world as we know it within their lifetime. A lot of scholars on environmentalism have called it a kind of secular religion, a belief system in an age of atheism that provides a purpose and direction without a belief in a god or gods. Scholar Sarah McFarlane Taylor wrote an excellent chapter on this in her book with Mara Einstein, Selling the Sacred: Religion and Marketing from CrossFit to QAnon. She stresses that PragerU mixes the lie that climate change is not happening and/or is no big deal, together with a truth that a number of climate scientists, media strategists, and popular culture critics agree on. That is, promoting apocalyptic thinking can be tragically counterproductive, as it tends to foster inaction. PragerU capitalizes on the proliferation of nihilism in their video and uses it as scaffolding to build up an entire narrative of a dangerous cult predicated on lies. Now listen, I am not telling you that it's bad to panic or be anxious about climate change. It's actually a result of you loving something about this world right now, and that's completely rational. In fact, it might be the best thing anyone can have. But do bear in mind that the end of the world is a sweeping statement. It really means the end of our world, which is an encapsulation of many things, good and bad, but not everything. Some things would go, some things would stay. And it might be time to ask ourselves, what would we want the next world to look like? How could we get there? I also want to note that doing something is always better than doing nothing. Years and years of climate denial have been rooted in the idea that we just need to wait for a little more research, a couple more inventions, action from powerful people. But we can do things now. And if it ends up being the wrong thing, at least we can say we cared and we tried and we're ready to try again. So don't fall victim to doomerism. Go do something. Whatever you think your world needs right now.